It's always nice with these minor prophets, many of whom are just 2 or 3 chapters long. It's always nice when you get to the latter part of the book, because most of them include at least some word of hope, some word of encouragement after all the judgment and wrath and how ticked off God is because people haven't been obedient and faithful and loving and just. And this is the case in Zephaniah chapter 3. And so in our little passage for today from verses 8 to 13, verse 9 is part of this statement about the conversion of the nations, this hope that one day the nations will come together. And our verse is, "At that time," the Lord is speaking, "I will change the speech of the peoples to a pure speech, that all of them may call on the name of the Lord and serve him with one accord." Now, when I read a passage like that and I hear about the speech of the people and that being converted to a pure speech, is there a biblical story that comes to mind for you? Well, for me, the first story that comes to mind is the Tower of Babel. Do you remember that story from way back early on in the book of Genesis, when the people are all coming together and they're going to try to build a tower that's going to reach all the way to heaven, which is really, spiritually speaking, a way of saying people are trying to become like God themselves. And in that story, God confuses the speech of the people so they can't communicate with each other anymore in this great big construction project, and it goes to pot and it doesn't end up happening. And in many ways, I read that Tower of Babel story as a story about trying to answer the question, why are there so many different languages in the world? Which is really puzzling, isn't it? I mean, think about it. A baby born in any country, could learn English or Ukrainian or Mandarin or Spanish. We're capable of learning any language. How did that happen? How do we have different alphabets that look so different? Anyway, that's the subject for another day. But it's fascinating to me, all this about speech. So we have the Tower of Babel story, where speech is confused. We have this promise in Zephaniah that the Lord's saying, "I'll change the speech of the peoples to a pure speech, that all of them may call on the name of the Lord and serve him with one accord." Now that should remind you of a New Testament story as well, and that is the day of Pentecost. And we remember on the day of Pentecost how there's Jews from every nation all over the known world there around the Mediterranean basin, and they're all in Jerusalem. The Holy Spirit comes, Peter speaks his message, and part of what happens is people hear about God's deeds of power in their own language. And there is this breach, this coming back together over the divide of language, that everyone can hear about the goodness and the power of God. And Peter says at the end of that message, and everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. And out of that Pentecost experience, a unified, empowered church is born, and the gospel starts spreading like wildfire to all the places who are represented in Acts chapter 2 for all those Jewish people who hear Peter's speech. This is one of those passages from Zephaniah that connects us back to an early part of the Bible, Tower of Babel and speech in Genesis, and also points us ahead to the New Testament, the day of Pentecost, and God wanting people from every language and tribe and tongue to hear the good news of God's transforming love in Jesus.